I stood there, surrounded by people who didn't know where to look. My sister raised her glass, her smile wide, her voice sharp enough to cut through the soft piano music. It's not like it was a real funeral, Ev. She was just a child. The air disappeared from the room. My throat went dry. For a second, even the clinking of silverware stopped. I stared at her, wondering if I'd heard right. But then she laughed. The kind of laugh that's meant to show she isn't sorry. My hand tightened on the white tablecloth. I could feel the edge of a plate pressing against my palm. I didn't say a word. Everyone else looked down, pretending to be busy with their food or phones. No one stood up for me, not even my parents. I realized then how alone I really was, even in a room full of family. I'm Evelyn Bell. I'm 32 years old, and today was supposed to be my daughter's memorial. Not a party, not a photo opportunity, just a quiet goodbye. But even grief isn't safe when you share blood with people who feed on it. If you've ever been spoken to like you didn't matter, if you've ever had to swallow pain while others smiled, you'll understand why I didn't speak. Sometimes silence is the only thing that keeps you from falling apart. I looked at Vanessa, her golden hair shining under the lights. She looked proud, like she'd done something brave by saying what everyone else was thinking. My father raised his glass halfway, pretending nothing had happened. My mother adjusted her necklace. I wanted to scream, but instead, I smiled, small, forced, the kind that hurts your cheeks. I remember every second of that day. The smell of lilies mixed with perfume, the flicker of candles, the sound of Vanessa's bracelets tapping the wine glass as she leaned forward. She'd always been the favorite, the one who could say anything and walk away untouched. I used to think that kind of confidence came from kindness. I learned later it came from never facing consequences. My daughter Lily had been gone for a month. She was 7. She loved the rain and hated the dark. I begged my family to help when she got sick. They said they'd pray. When the hospital bills came, I sold my car. Vanessa posted vacation pictures from Greece that week. I'd invited them today because I thought maybe grief would make them human again. Maybe they'd sit beside me and remember her laugh. But all I got was a toast. Vanessa leaned back in her chair and said, "You can't live in sadness forever, Ev. People move on." Her words floated through the silence like ash. I looked at her hands, perfectly manicured, her new ring catching the light, and thought about the last time I'd held my daughter's hand. It was still warm. "I'm not asking anyone to stay in sadness," I said quietly. "Just to show respect." Vanessa tilted her head. "You're too sensitive. You've always been." The way she said it, like it was an insult, made my chest tighten. I felt my nails dig into my skin. I wanted to tell her that being sensitive was what made me stay up through hospital nights, what made me hold Lily even when she couldn't breathe. But no one would have listened. The people around us began whispering. Someone tried to change the subject. I heard a man clear his throat and say something about the weather. I wanted to disappear. The lights flickered once, just enough to make everyone glance up. I stared at the flicker and wished it would stay dark. Darkness is honest. It doesn't pretend to care. Vanessa poured herself more wine and laughed again. "Honestly, Ev, you should thank me. At least I brought life to this room." My chest ached. I tried to swallow, but it felt like my throat was full of glass. I forced myself to breathe. "You're right," I said softly. "You always do." She smirked, thinking she'd won. Maybe she had for that moment, but something inside me shifted. Small, quiet, almost invisible. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, steadier, the kind of feeling that waits. After the reception, I went to the restroom just to breathe. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My lipstick had faded. My eyes looked hollow. I whispered to myself, "Don't cry here." I couldn't give them that satisfaction. Through the thin wall, I heard laughter from the dining room. Vanessa's laugh. My mother's too. I wiped my face, fixed my hair, and walked back out as if nothing had happened. If they wanted a show, I'd give them silence instead. When I returned to the table, Vanessa was showing photos on her phone. "Look at this, everyone," she said. "I'm thinking of making this my engagement venue. Isn't it gorgeous?" The date on her screen froze me. It was the same date as Lily's birthday. I didn't react. I just sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap. My father said, "That's a fine day, Vanessa. Fewer bookings that time of year." No one looked at me. I was invisible, sitting at my own child's memorial. I tried to stand, but my knees trembled. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out softer than I wanted. No one answered. I walked out into the cold evening air. Outside, the parking lot lights buzzed. I leaned against my car, staring at the clouds. The night smelled like rain. For a moment, I could almost hear Lily's voice. The way she'd say, "Mommy, look, stars." I looked up, but there were none, just a heavy gray sky. I thought about Vanessa's words again. It's not like it was a real funeral. She had no idea how real it was to me. How every night since, I'd walked past Lily's empty room and felt the air leave my chest. I sat in the driver's seat for nearly an hour, watching the lights of the hall go out one by one. When the last car left, I whispered, "You'll regret tonight." Not as a threat. As a truth I hadn't yet learned how to tell. That night, when I got home, I placed Lily's photo on the windowsill, the one where she was wearing the yellow dress I'd sewn by hand. I lit a candle beside it and said, "They won't take your memory too." I didn't sleep. The words kept repeating in my head, each time sharper. She was just a child. By morning, the flowers from the memorial had wilted. I picked one up and pressed it between the pages of Lily's storybook. My hands were steady. I realized then, grief had burned everything soft inside me, but what was left was something even stronger. Later, I scrolled through social media, half numb, and there it was, Vanessa's post, a group photo from that same night. The caption read, "Celebrating life with family." My parents were smiling beside her. I stared at the screen until the edges blurred. Then I closed the phone, sat on the edge of my bed, and whispered, "I won't forget this." When I closed my eyes, I could still hear her laughter, bright, echoing, careless, mixing with the faint clinking of wine glasses. And I knew that one day, that sound would belong to me. When I got home, the house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, only reminds you what's missing. Lily's toys were still scattered in the living room, her small shoes under the coffee table, her blanket folded halfway across the couch, where she used to fall asleep waiting for cartoons. I didn't have the heart to move anything. I stood there, keys still in my hand, looking at the life she'd left behind. It felt wrong to touch it, but worse, to leave it. The air smelled faintly of the lavender shampoo she loved. Every corner of that house still belonged to her. I sat on the couch and pressed my palms against my knees, trying to breathe through the silence. It was heavier than grief, sharper than anger. I had spent weeks planning that memorial, hoping it would help me let her go, at least a little. But Vanessa turned it into something else, a scene, a performance, another chance for her to shine, while I drowned quietly behind her smile. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who stayed polite no matter what was said. Tonight, I wished I hadn't been. I took out my phone, meaning to check messages, maybe find some kind words from the few friends I still had left. Instead, my screen lit up with Vanessa's name, a new post, a picture of her holding a glass of champagne surrounded by people laughing. The caption read, "Birthday bash success, grateful for the love tonight." I blinked at it, thinking maybe I was reading the date wrong. But no, it was the same day, the same hour even. While I was lighting candles for my daughter's memory, my sister was blowing out hers. If you've ever had someone show you how little your pain meant to them, you'll understand that kind of silence. The one that doesn't break, no matter how much you want to scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the phone glowing in my hands, feeling my chest tighten until it hurt to breathe. Post after post filled my feed. Vanessa in a silver dress, laughing beside a cake. My mother in the background, clapping. My father holding a glass, smiling like nothing in the world had gone wrong. The same man who told me earlier that day to stay strong and stop living in the past. I clicked through the pictures until my eyes blurred. In one of them, the candles on Vanessa's cake spelled Happy 30th. My daughter never even reached 8. I tried to remember the sound of Lily's laugh, but all I could hear was Vanessa's. The screen dimmed, but I didn't put the phone down. My fingers trembled. They had all known. That was what burned the most. My parents, my cousins, even my aunt. Every one of them who'd said they were too busy to come to the memorial. They hadn't forgotten. They'd chosen where to be. A part of me still wanted to believe there was some mistake. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe she'd posted the wrong date. I checked the timestamp again. No mistake. It was live streamed. I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. The screen reflected a thin line of candlelight from the memorial photo I'd brought home. Lily's face in the frame looked so calm, her eyes so full of trust. I whispered, "They were laughing while I buried you." My voice cracked on the last word. For years, I had believed my family's distance came from fear of saying the wrong thing. But tonight, I saw it clearly. They just didn't care. I was useful when they needed help, invisible when I needed love. I stood and walked into Lily's room. Her bed was still made the way she left it, her stuffed rabbit leaning against the pillow. The walls were covered with drawings, rainbows, flowers, smiling suns. I touched the crayon marks with my fingertips. "I kept asking them to come visit you," I said softly. "They never did." I sat on her bed and opened the box I'd been avoiding for weeks. The one the hospital gave me. Her bracelet, her little hair clip, the card with her handprint. I held each piece until my hands started to shake. Then I placed them back carefully, like they were made of glass. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Vanessa had tagged my parents this time. "Family means everything," the caption said, followed by 3 red hearts. I opened the photo. My parents were sitting beside her, smiling wider than I'd seen in years. My father had his arm around Vanessa's shoulder, and my mother was laughing with her eyes closed. I stared at that image until tears blurred it into colors. I remembered the night Lily was admitted to the hospital. I'd called Vanessa 3 times. No answer. I texted Mom. She read it and didn't reply. My father called the next morning to ask if I'd sorted the bills. That was all. Back then, I told myself they were busy, that maybe they couldn't handle hospitals and sickness the way I could. But that picture told the truth. They could handle laughter just fine. I walked to the kitchen and filled a glass of water, my hands shaking so much I spilled half of it on the counter. I wiped it with a towel, then stopped midway. The water spreading on the marble looked like the tears I hadn't allowed myself to cry. I leaned against the counter, staring at nothing. The clock ticked quietly. Midnight. I thought about calling Vanessa, about asking her how she could celebrate on the day I buried my child. But what would that change? She'd laugh again. She'd say I was being dramatic. She'd tell me, like she always did, "You take everything too seriously, Ev." I turned off the lights and stood by the window. The street outside was empty, except for the faint glow of porch lights. My reflection stared back at me. Hollow eyes, pale skin, someone I barely recognized. "I used to love you," I whispered to the reflection. "All of you." The phone buzzed again. Another comment on Vanessa's post. I ignored it. I walked back to the living room, picked up the framed photo of Lily, and held it to my chest. "They'll regret it," I said softly. "Not now, but one day." I sat there for a long time, the candlelight flickering across the room. Each flicker showed pieces of what I'd lost. The half-folded blanket, the unopened letters, the empty chair. Everything they'd ignored, everything I wouldn't forget. When the candle finally burned down, I blew it out. The smoke curled upward, thin and gray, like a whisper leaving the room. I watched it fade into the darkness, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I felt something else. Still, quiet, and waiting. That was when my phone screen lit up one last time. One new photo. Vanessa again, raising her glass. My parents beside her. And behind them, in the corner of the frame, the date banner hanging on the wall. The same day, the same hour. The proof I hadn't wanted. I looked at their faces, smiling under the golden lights, and felt something inside me turn cold. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. When my parents called and asked me to come for dinner, I almost said no. But part of me still wanted to believe they cared, that maybe they'd seen Vanessa's post and realized how cruel it was. I spent the afternoon convincing myself this would be different. Maybe they'd talk about Lily. Maybe they'd say her name without rushing to change the subject. I dressed simply, tied my hair back, and drove in silence, rehearsing small smiles I didn't feel. The house looked the same, painted white, trimmed bushes, a porch light that flickered like it always had. My mother opened the door before I could knock. "Finally," she said. "We thought you'd changed your mind again." Her voice was polite, but her eyes moved over me like she was checking for something. I stepped inside. The smell of roast chicken filled the air. My father was at the table, reading the paper like it was just another night. Vanessa sat beside him, nails painted, phone in hand, smiling at something on her screen. She didn't look up. "Hi," I said quietly. Vanessa finally looked at me. "Wow, you look tired." She smiled as if it were concern. If you've ever walked into a room expecting comfort and found judgment instead, you'll understand what that moment felt like. My father folded his paper. "Let's eat before it gets cold." I sat down across from Vanessa. The soup was already served, steam rose in soft curls, but when I took the first sip, it was cold. I set the spoon down and tried to steady my hands. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking. You need to move on, Evelyn. Life doesn't stop for one child." The spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered against the bowl. My heart stopped for a second. "One child?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't meet my eyes. "You can't live in the past forever." Vanessa leaned back, crossing her arms. "He's right. You're making everyone uncomfortable. People talk, you know. You should focus on something positive. Maybe volunteer or get a hobby." Her words fell like stones. I stared at the soup, watching the small ripples fade. "Lily's only been gone a month," I said. "I don't know how to pretend that's fine," Vanessa shrugged. "Pretending is how most people survive." My mother sighed like she was tired of the conversation. "We all loved her, Evelyn, but sitting in grief won't bring her back. We thought dinner would help you feel normal again." Normal. The word felt like a slap. There was nothing normal about burying your child and seeing your sister's birthday pictures the same night. Nothing normal about your parents smiling in them. I looked up and met my father's eyes. He looked away first. Vanessa tapped her glass with her ring finger. That's when I noticed it. A new diamond, large enough to catch every bit of light in the room. "You got engaged," I said quietly. She smiled, holding up her hand so the stone flashed. "Last night, Daniel proposed. He wanted to wait until after your situation." My mother's voice softened. "Isn't it beautiful? He's such a good man. You'll love him when you meet." I swallowed hard. The soup tasted like metal. "Congratulations," I said. My voice sounded calm, but inside something cracked. Vanessa grinned. "Thanks, Ev. We're already planning everything." "Oh." She glanced at my parents, laughing softly. "We picked a date, too." My stomach turned. "When?" "The 10th, she said. "It's a Saturday, easy for guests. Perfect weather that time of year." I froze. The 10th, Lily's anniversary. I stared at her, trying to understand if she realized what she'd said. Of course she did. Her smile said everything. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You mean Lily's day?" Vanessa didn't flinch. "I mean my wedding day." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My father shifted in his chair. "It's just a date, Evelyn. You can't claim it forever." I looked down at my hands. They were shaking so badly I had to clench them together to hide it. "You could have picked any other day," I whispered. Vanessa tilted her head. "It wasn't personal. Don't make it about you." My mother reached for the salt, pretending not to hear. I realized then they'd all agreed. They'd sat around the same table, probably days ago, and chosen this moment, chosen to tell me like it was nothing. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. I hope it's beautiful, I said finally. I hope it's everything you want. Vanessa smiled wider. It will be. The room went still. I heard the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the soft scrape of my father's knife against his plate. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that once made me warm. I pushed my chair back and stood. Thank you for dinner, I said. My voice didn't shake. It was enlightening. My father looked up. Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. I'm not, I said quietly. Just done. Vanessa laughed under her breath. You always make such scenes. I ignored her. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking against the floor, each step louder than the last. My mother called after me. You'll regret leaving like this. I turned back just once. I already regret coming. Outside, the air was cold. The porch light buzzed faintly, the same sound it made when I was a child waiting for my father to unlock the door after school. Back then, this house had felt like safety. Tonight, it felt like a stranger's place. I sat in my car, hands still trembling. I looked through the windshield at the dining room window. Inside, I could see Vanessa showing off her ring again, my mother smiling, my father raising his glass. They didn't even notice I was gone. The street was quiet, the only sound the faint wind moving through the trees. I stared at the house until my eyes blurred. Somewhere deep inside, under the grief and humiliation, a new feeling began to form. Not loud, not hot, just steady, cold. They'd taken my child's day and turned it into their celebration. But I'd take something from them too. Not tonight, not with shouting or tears. I'd wait. I'd make it clean. When I started the car, my reflection in the window didn't look like me anymore. It looked like someone who had finally stopped asking why. I started cleaning Lily's room because I couldn't stand the dust anymore. It had been settling like quiet judgment on everything she'd loved. Her books, her drawings, even the stuffed rabbit she never slept without. I told myself it was just cleaning, but when I picked up her old school bag, a stack of papers slipped out and scattered across the floor. I bent down to gather them, and that's when I saw the corner of a folded envelope under her bed. It was one of the hospital bills. The date hit me like a punch. I'd forgotten how many came in those months, one after another, until the pile started feeling like another illness, one that couldn't be treated. I sat down on the floor and pulled the rest of the envelopes out. Some were unopened. Others had notes scribbled on them in my handwriting. Call again Monday. Try bank. Ask De. I remembered that night clearly. The hospital had called, asking for payment before the next round of treatment. I had less than half the amount. I'd gone to my father's house that same evening. He was watching the news, half listening as I explained everything. The cost, the urgency, the numbers I'd already tried. When I finished, he didn't even turn down the volume. We've already done enough, he said. His tone was calm, like he was talking about weather, not my child's life. I'd stood there, hands clasped so tight my knuckles hurt. I just need a small loan. I'll pay you back, I promise. He sighed, eyes still on the screen. You always say that. I remember staring at the side of his face, realizing I could beg, and it wouldn't matter. Dad, please. He raised his hand to silence me. You made your choices, Evelyn. We all have to live with ours. If you've ever had someone you trusted turn their face away when you needed them most, you'll understand the kind of silence that followed. I left without saying goodbye. Now, years later, those envelopes still felt warm, like they carried the heat of all those nights I couldn't sleep. I stacked them neatly on Lily's bed and sat beside them, feeling something bitter rise in my chest. My father had said they'd done enough, yet I'd seen the receipts from Vanessa's party. The decorations alone cost more than that hospital bill. I picked up my phone. Vanessa's face filled the screen, smiling, glowing. Her new post read, "Finally ours, new property secured." Beneath it, a picture of a shiny white house with a glass balcony. My stomach twisted as I read the caption. A fresh start in life. Hard work pays off. The price tag was in the comments. $1,000. The same amount I'd once begged for to save my daughter. I stared at the screen, frozen. She'd bought a new home while my child was dying in a rented room that smelled of disinfectant and fear. I scrolled down, and there they were again. My parents. My mother commenting with hearts. My father writing, "Proud of you, sweetheart. You've earned it." Earned it. The words made my chest tighten until I could barely breathe. I turned off the phone, but the image burned behind my eyelids. Vanessa standing on her new porch, arms wide, as if the world had always been hers. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. My own roof leaked when it rained. My savings had been drained by hospital bills and funeral costs. Every part of my life was patched together by survival. And yet, somehow, the people who turned their backs on me lived untouched. I opened the drawer of Lily's desk and found her crayons still in a small box. A few were broken. The pink one had teeth marks at the end. I held it between my fingers, remembering how she used to draw houses. Big, colorful, full of windows. "So we can see each other," she'd say. She wanted everyone to fit inside. The memory ached like a bruise. I sat there for a long time, tracing the hospital letters with the tip of that crayon. "We've already done enough." My father's voice wouldn't leave my head. He'd said it once, but it echoed through every year that followed. Every missed birthday, every unopened message. Vanessa had always been the one they helped. When she failed her first business, Dad bailed her out. When she totaled her car, Mom said, "It could happen to anyone." When I lost my job, they told me to learn to stand on my own. I looked around the room again, my eyes landing on the old bookshelf. I'd used to hide money inside Lily's storybooks, saving coins like a child because no one else would help. I pulled out the books, one by one. The pages smelled like dust and time. Between two of them, I found a photograph. Lily sitting on my lap, both of us smiling, her little hand gripping my sleeve. I hadn't seen that picture since the funeral. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them. I let them fall, soaking into the corner of the photo. For the first time, I wasn't crying for her death. I was crying for every lie I'd believed about family, about love, about fairness. When I stopped shaking, I turned the photo over. On the back, written in my daughter's uneven handwriting, were the words, "Me and Mommy, we win." I laughed once, quietly. It sounded broken, but it felt right. We win. Maybe not then, maybe not in the way the world counted winning, but those words gave me something I hadn't felt in months. A pulse. I looked back at the hospital envelopes, the phone, the open window. The wind moved through the curtains, soft and cool. I realized that I had spent too long believing that surviving was enough. It wasn't. Not anymore. I stood up and gathered every envelope into a neat stack. Then I opened my laptop. The same lawyer who'd handled my grandmother's estate years ago still had his number listed online. I typed his name into the search bar and stared at it for a long moment. My reflection looked different in the screen. My face was pale, eyes red, but steady. I whispered to the room, "Then I'll take back what was mine." The words didn't sound like anger. They sounded like promise. The lawyer came by in the afternoon. I hadn't expected anyone, but he stood at my door holding a folder and wearing that cautious look people have when they know bad news is inside their hands. His name was Mr. Kane. He said he needed to discuss my late grandmother's estate. I told him he must have the wrong bell. My family never included me in anything that involved money. He gave a faint smile and said, "That's exactly why I'm here." I let him in. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. He sat at the edge of my couch, careful not to wrinkle his suit. I could tell he didn't want to stay long. "Your grandmother's estate was divided among your family," he began. "But there's something odd in the documents." He slid a folder across the coffee table. I hesitated before opening it. My grandmother, Margaret Bell, had been the only person who ever made me feel like family meant something. She used to bake cookies every Sunday. leaving the best ones aside for me when Vanessa grabbed most of them first. She promised once quietly that she'd make things right one day. I opened the folder. The papers were copies of legal transfers, signatures, and property statements. My name was there, next to a neat signature that wasn't mine. I felt my stomach tighten. "What is this?" I asked. "It shows you signed over your inheritance, your share of the estate, 10 years ago," he said. I stared at him. "I never signed anything." He nodded slowly. "That's why I came. The handwriting doesn't match your file from previous documents." If you've ever discovered betrayal in ink, cold, silent, impossible to undo, you know the kind of stillness that takes over. I didn't yell. I just kept turning the pages, each one heavier than the last. There were multiple signatures, all dated the same day. The witness name caught my eye. Daniel Miller, my sister's husband. The room seemed to blur. "Daniel's a realtor," I said softly. "He handled my grandmother's property sale years ago." Mr. Kane adjusted his glasses. That would explain how he accessed the documents. The signature was notarized under his company's seal. I could feel my pulse in my throat. My grandmother's estate had been divided. Vanessa got the lake house, my parents received the farmland, and I got nothing. Back then, I thought maybe Grandma had changed her will. She died before I could ask. My family told me not to dig into it, that money ruins people. Now I understood why they said that. I flipped to the last page and found a note that said transfer complete. My forged name was written in black ink, graceful and confident. Nothing like the way my hand used to shake when signing real papers. I whispered, "She left me something." Mr. Kane looked up. "She left each grandchild a share. Yours was the largest. A trust fund, property, and personal assets. Roughly $200,000. The words didn't sound real. I'd spent years struggling to keep my lights on, selling furniture, skipping meals, and all that time, they'd stolen money that could have saved me and Lily. I asked him quietly, "Can it be reversed?" He exhaled. "If we can prove forgery, yes, but it won't be simple. You'll need patience." Patience. The same word doctors used when Lily was in treatment. The same word my father used when I asked for help. It felt bitter now. I closed the folder halfway. "How did you find me?" He smiled faintly. "Your grandmother's will mentioned your name twice. She said Evelyn won't fight, but she deserves her peace." That line stayed with me. When I reviewed the estate this month, I noticed inconsistencies. I wanted to check for myself. I didn't know what to say. For a moment, the room felt like it had air again. Then the anger came, quiet, measured, and deep. "Vanessa and Daniel handled all the legal work back then," I said. "My parents said it was too complicated for me." Mr. Kane nodded. "You trusted them." I looked down at my hands. "I trusted everyone I shouldn't have." He closed his briefcase gently. "You have a right to reclaim what's yours. Would you like me to proceed?" I hesitated. My voice was calm when I finally spoke. "Yes." He left soon after, promising to contact me in a few days. When the door closed, I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the folder on the table. It looked harmless, just paper and ink, but it carried years of deceit. I walked to the window and watched the street. A car passed, headlights flashing across the glass. For a moment, I imagined Vanessa in the passenger seat, laughing, her diamond ring catching the light. I picked up my phone and opened her social media. Her latest post was a photo of that same ring, captioned, "Grateful for everything my husband's built for us." I almost laughed. They'd built it with stolen bricks. I scrolled further and found another picture. Her standing in front of a house, my grandmother's house. I recognized the porch railing, the window boxes Grandma and I had painted blue. Vanessa had written, "Finally home." My chest tightened until I had to sit down. That house was supposed to be mine. Grandma said she wanted me to have it, that it was where love still lived. I hadn't seen it in years. Now it belonged to Vanessa. I opened the folder again and traced the forged signature with my finger. My name looked strange there, stolen, used without my permission. I thought about every night I'd gone hungry, every bill I'd begged to extend, every hospital visit I'd faced alone. They'd watch me struggle while living off what was meant for me. The fury that rose in me wasn't loud. It didn't shake or burn. It was quiet, the kind that settles deep and stays there. I gathered the papers back into the folder and pressed the edges flat. I looked around my house, the cracks in the ceiling, the peeling paint on the door. I remembered my father's voice from that night when I asked for help. "We've already done enough." No, they hadn't done enough. They'd done everything to break me. I stood by the window until the streetlight flickered off. My reflection in the glass looked different, tired but awake, fragile but clear. I whispered to myself, "They took from the wrong woman." And for the first time in a long while, I meant every word. I stopped answering their calls the day after the lawyer left. At first, it felt strange. My phone used to buzz every morning with messages from Vanessa, mostly pretending to check in, really just fishing for gossip. Now the silence was a kind of peace. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. I deleted the family group chat and blocked every number that carried their last name. It wasn't revenge yet. It was survival. For weeks, I said nothing. I wanted them to think I'd given up. That was the only way I could move freely. When people underestimate you, they show their truest selves. Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone watching. If you've ever stopped talking just to see who panics first, you'll understand how powerful it feels. I started volunteering at a small community legal center downtown. The first day I walked in pretending I just wanted to help organize files. But every time someone mentioned property law, I listened a little closer. They talked about title histories, forged signatures, financial tracing. I took notes when no one was looking. Most people there saw me as quiet, polite, maybe even harmless. They had no idea what I was learning or why. One of the lawyers, a woman named Claire, noticed I stayed late. "You're committed," she said once. "I'm just curious," I told her. "About what?" "About how people steal things and make it look legal." She gave me a small smile, like she thought I was joking. I wasn't. I spent every evening reading case files after hours, memorizing how money moved between names, companies, and trusts. Sometimes the numbers made my head spin, but every time I felt like giving up, I'd remember my father's voice saying, "We've already done enough." That sentence had built a fire that didn't burn out. It only got colder, sharper, smarter. One afternoon, while organizing old files, I found a guidebook on tracing offshore assets. It mentioned shell companies, hidden accounts, and trusts used to hide stolen inheritance funds. My heart started pounding. My grandmother's trust had been the foundation of her estate. If Vanessa and Daniel forged my signature, they wouldn't have stopped there. I copied the steps from that guide into my notebook word for word. Days turned into weeks. My silence became its own message. Vanessa called 5 times before realizing I wasn't going to answer. The 6th time, she used my mother's phone. I didn't pick up. The 7th time, I did. "Evelyn?" Her voice sounded falsely sweet, the kind she used when she wanted something. "You disappeared. Are you okay?" "I'm doing fine," I said. She hesitated. "Dad's worried." "Tell him not to be," she laughed softly. "You're always so dramatic. I just wanted to check in." "I'm sure you did." The line went quiet for a moment. "You sound different." Maybe I finally learned how to listen. I could almost hear her frown. "Well, I hope you're not still angry. We're family, Ev. Things get messy sometimes." I smiled into the silence. "I'm not angry." She relaxed instantly, I could tell. "Good. Because Daniel and I wanted to invite you over sometime. No tension. Just a normal dinner." "Maybe another time," I said, calm and flat. "Suit yourself." When she hung up, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I saved her number under a fake name in a small app I downloaded for recording calls. Every word she spoke could matter later. Silence doesn't mean forgiveness. It means patience. At the legal center, I started helping with document scanning. It gave me access to software that could check for property records and business licenses. During breaks, I searched Vanessa's name. At first, nothing. Then I added Daniel's company, a real estate firm, 3 branches, all under one holding account. I followed that thread through every public record I could find until I hit a name I didn't recognize. Bellwood Investments Limited. The name felt deliberate. Bell for our family, Wood for the property Grandma once owned. The account was registered overseas. My pulse quickened. It listed the original funding source as Margaret Trust Holdings. That was my grandmother's trust. Vanessa had hidden the money in another country, probably to make it unreachable if I ever found out. I sat there staring at the screen, my fingers frozen above the keyboard. For a moment, I couldn't move. My grandmother's handwriting flashed in my mind. The way she used to sign her name with a loop at the end, gentle and proud. To think that her trust, something built from years of saving, had become their secret wallet made my stomach twist. Claire walked by and asked, "You okay?" I nodded quickly. Just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I printed the record, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my bag. Every step out of that office felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing against me. When I got home, I locked the door and spread the paper on the kitchen table. The document showed 3 transfers from my grandmother's trust into Bellwood Investments, each signed by Daniel, witnessed by Vanessa. The first transfer happened the same month Lily was in the hospital. The second, 2 days after Grandma's funeral. The third, 1 year later. I leaned back in the chair, my breath coming slow. They'd built their life on graves. My grandmother's, my daughter's, and mine. I ran my fingers over the lines of printed ink until the paper crinkled under my hand. I didn't cry. There were no tears left for them, only a stillness that spread through me like winter. That night, I sat by the window, watching the quiet street outside. My phone buzzed with another call from Vanessa. I didn't answer. I stared at her name until it faded off the screen. Then I turned back to the document, reading every line again and again until I could see the pattern clearly. Every secret leaves a trail, no matter how deep it's buried. And now, I had the first piece of it. I whispered to myself, barely loud enough to hear, "You thought I'd stay quiet." The clock ticked softly beside me. I folded the paper, slipped it into a folder, and placed it on the shelf beside Lily's photo. My voice was calm when I said, "But silence is how I win." Mr. Kane called me 2 days after I found the offshore account. His voice was calm, steady, like someone used to delivering bad news gently. "I've gone through everything you sent," he said. "Can you come by the office tomorrow?" The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I agreed without asking questions. The next morning, the sky looked heavy, gray, the kind of day that never wakes up. I drove in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. His office sat above a small insurance agency. Nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. I liked that. There were no pictures on the walls, no fake smiles from clients, just shelves of files and the smell of coffee that had been reheated too many times. He greeted me with a soft nod. "Evelyn, I've confirmed your suspicions." I sat down across from him. "Tell me." He opened a folder, the same one I'd given him, now thicker, filled with new documents, highlighted pages, sticky notes marking places where the truth lived in ink. "Your sister and her husband committed fraud," he said simply. "The forgery is obvious once compared with your original signatures, and the offshore transfer traces directly to them." I stared at the papers. "So it's real," he nodded. "Very real." If you've ever had someone finally say out loud what you already knew in your bones, you know the strange calm that follows. It's not relief, it's clarity. Everything inside me went still. I asked, "Can it be fixed?" He leaned back in his chair. "Legally, yes, but it's going to take time, patience, and precision. If we act too fast, they'll hide everything." Patience was all I had left, I said quietly. He studied me for a moment. You've been through a lot. I'm still going through it. He gave a small, understanding nod. Most people in your position want to confront their family immediately. They think shouting will bring justice. But silence, Ms. Bell, is stronger. It keeps them from preparing. His words sank deep. I thought about every time I'd stayed quiet while Vanessa talked over me. Every dinner where my parents ignored my voice. I used to think silence made me weak. Now it felt like armor. Mr. Kane continued. The trust was dissolved illegally. They used your grandmother's estate to buy assets and shift funds overseas. I found 3 major transactions, totaling over $250,000, all of it under their names. I looked at the numbers printed across the page. It didn't even look like money. It looked like years of struggle, of bills unpaid, of nights sitting alone in the dark because I couldn't afford to fix the electricity. They built their lives on my grandmother's grave, I said softly. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. I don't want sorry, I said. I want it undone. He hesitated, then leaned forward. We can pursue criminal charges, but it'll expose everything. Family, finances, your late grandmother's trust. It will be public. I don't care. You might, he said gently. Once it starts, it doesn't stop. There's no clean ending. I sat back in the chair. They didn't give me one either. He smiled faintly at that, like he understood. You'll need evidence, emails, messages, anything that ties them directly to the forgery. I can handle the legal filings, but you'll have to gather the personal proof. I thought about Vanessa's voice on the recordings I'd started collecting, the text messages filled with her false sweetness. I already started. He raised an eyebrow. Smart. I learned from them. He chuckled once, quietly, the sound fading almost as soon as it came. You're calm about this. What's the point of shaking? I said. They already saw me break once. I won't give them that again. He looked at me differently then. Not like a client, but like someone who had survived something heavy and still managed to stand. You remind me of someone, he said. A woman I helped years ago. Her family tried to erase her too. She rebuilt everything they took. Did she win? She didn't need to, he said. They fell apart on their own. That line stayed with me. Maybe revenge wasn't always loud. Maybe it was just truth, finally revealed, destroying everything it touched. I watched him organize the papers, methodical, precise. What happens next? I asked. I'll file a preliminary claim to freeze their assets, he said. That will keep them from moving the money again. Once the investigation begins, we'll subpoena bank records. It'll take months. I can wait. He looked up, meeting my eyes. You've waited long enough, haven't you? I nodded. Too long. He handed me a pen. Sign here. This gives me authority to act on your behalf. I signed my name slowly, making sure every letter was mine this time. When I finished, he said, I'll be in touch as soon as there's progress. I stood to leave, but before I reached the door, I turned back. Mr. Kane, I said, why did you help me in the first place? You could have ignored this. He smiled gently. Because people like you remind me why the law still matters. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain again. I walked to my car, folder in hand, feeling heavier and lighter all at once. For the first time in years, I had something solid. Proof, direction, purpose. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. I sat behind the wheel and stared at the office window. Mr. Kane's silhouette moved past the blinds, steady and deliberate. I thought about his warning, patience, precision, silence. I repeated those words until they felt like steps I could follow. As I drove home, the rain finally started. It hit the windshield softly at first, then harder. Each drop sounded like a countdown. When I reached my driveway, I didn't rush inside. I sat there listening, watching the streetlights blur through the wet glass. I whispered to myself, no turning back. It wasn't fear, it was promise. The next time I'd hear Mr. Kane's voice, I knew everything would start to move. and I was ready to watch the world that shut me out begin to crumble under its own weight. The invitation came in a gold envelope, thick and glossy, with Vanessa's name embossed across the front like it was a royal decree. I almost threw it away, but the line written in her careful fake handwriting stopped me. "I want peace, Ev. Please come." Peace. That word had a way of sounding clean when it came from a liar's mouth. I read the invitation twice, then set it down beside the folder of legal notices. If you've ever been asked to smile for the same people who ruined you, you'll understand how hard it is to keep your hands steady while saying yes. The night of the party, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I chose a simple black dress, quiet, sharp, nothing that begged for attention. My grandmother used to say black was a color of truth. It shows stains the quickest. I slipped the folded documents into my purse, checked the clasp twice, and told myself I wasn't going for revenge. I was going for closure. But deep down, I knew better. The venue was everything Vanessa loved: loud, expensive, and full of people who cared more about photos than feelings. Chandeliers sparkled like stage stars. Waiters moved in perfect rhythm, carrying trays of champagne. I recognized half the guests from her social media feed, people who'd never called me after Lily's funeral, but still greeted me tonight with wide smiles and shallow sympathy. Vanessa spotted me near the entrance. Her smile widened instantly, camera ready, every tooth shining under the golden lights. She spread her arms as she walked over, her fiancé close behind. "You came," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I did," I replied softly. She hugged me, tight but cold, while her face stayed pleasant for the photographers circling nearby. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't ruin this one, Ev." I smiled, the same way people smile at storms before they close the windows. Wouldn't dream of it. Her perfume was heavy, familiar. It smelled like every false apology she'd ever given. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who hurt you and pretended to be fine, you know that peace isn't quiet. It's control. I moved through the crowd, nodding politely, hearing pieces of laughter and gossip like static. Someone mentioned the house she and Daniel bought, the perfect new chapter. I sipped my drink slowly, letting their words drift around me like smoke. My mother waved from across the room. She looked happy, younger even. My father stood beside her, his arm around Vanessa's shoulder, proud as always. When his eyes met mine, something flickered there. Unease, maybe guilt. But he looked away quickly. Vanessa tapped her glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. Daniel and I are so excited to celebrate this next step." Her voice trembled in just the right way, like she'd practiced it. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. She looked like everything I wasn't allowed to be: chosen, adored, untouched. I clapped too, softly, calmly. The papers in my purse pressed against my side, a quiet reminder of what I carried. They were folded neatly, copies of property transfers, signatures, and legal filings that would undo everything she'd built on lies. The night went on with laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, watching Vanessa float between guests like a swan among ripples she created herself. Daniel never left her side. He looked proud but nervous, the way guilty men look when they forget who might be watching. He approached me once, smiling too politely. "Evelyn, it's been a while." "It has." "You look good." "I do my best," I said. He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Vanessa was really hoping you'd come. She wants to fix things." I met his eyes. "Does she?" He shifted his weight. "She's changed." "No," I said, calm and steady. "She's just richer." He tried to laugh it off, but his throat tightened. "Still sharp, I see." "Still learning," I said, turning away before he could answer. A band started playing, soft music drowning the murmurs. Vanessa took the mic again. "Before we dance, I want to thank my family," she said, smiling directly at my parents. "Mom, Dad, you've always believed in me. I wouldn't be who I am without you." My mother wiped a tear. My father nodded proudly. I felt nothing. The room clapped again. I wondered how many of them knew the money that paid for this party had come from a dead woman's trust. When Vanessa called me to the stage for a sister moment, I didn't refuse. I walked up slowly, aware of every camera turning toward us. She took my hand and squeezed it, smiling wide for the crowd. "I'm so glad she's here tonight," she said. "It means the world to me." I smiled back. "Wouldn't miss it." For a second, she looked at me, trying to read what I meant. But then the photographers shouted for us to pose, and her face brightened again. She turned slightly toward the camera, pulling me closer like we were the picture of forgiveness. Behind that stage smile, she whispered, "See, we're fine." I whispered back, "For now." Her smile froze for half a second before she turned to the crowd again. The flashbulbs kept going, capturing what looked like reconciliation. It was perfect, exactly what I needed. The whole world would see us together, laughing, hugging, all smiles. No one would ever guess what sat in my purse, waiting to be mailed the next morning. When the photographer asked us to face each other for one last shot, I tilted my head, pretending warmth. "Congratulations, Vanessa," I said softly. She laughed for the camera. "Thank you, Ev. Maybe this will finally bring peace between us." "Maybe," I said, matching her tone. "One way or another." Her laugh faltered, just for a moment, before she turned away to greet the next guest. I stepped down from the stage, the music fading behind me. My fingers brushed the clasp of my purse again. The documents inside felt heavier now, like the truth itself was pressing against my side, reminding me that peace has a cost, and she was about to pay it. As I walked past the film crew recording the event, I heard the cameraman say, "Got it, the sisters' reunion shot looks perfect." Perfect. That word echoed in my mind as I smiled for the last time that night. Vanessa would post that video soon, her arm around me, both of us laughing under golden light, and no one would know that in the same frame, her downfall had already begun. The first rumor came from a message I wasn't supposed to see. Someone in the neighborhood group chat mentioned Daniel's company being under review. The words were small, buried between birthday wishes and gossip, but they stuck in my mind like a thorn. By evening, I got a text from an old coworker who said the same thing, something about missing funds and a government audit. I didn't respond. I just set the phone down and watched the rain slide down my window. Sometimes justice doesn't walk through the front door. It sneaks in quietly, like a guest no one invited. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was the family group chat, the one I'd muted months ago. Dozens of messages popped up in quick flashes. First, my mother asking if anyone had heard from Daniel, then my father saying he'd handle it. Then silence. No one mentioned me, but I knew they were thinking about me. People always do when things start to crack. If you've ever watched the people who wronged you start to panic, you know the strange peace it brings. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like breathing for the first time in years. 2 days later, the silence broke again. My father called, voice tight, pretending everything was fine. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about Daniel's audit, would you?" he asked. "Why would I?" I said quietly. He hesitated. "Because you've been involved with lawyers lately." "Maybe you should ask Daniel about that," I said. "He seems to have a lot of paperwork to explain." He muttered something under his breath before hanging up. I stared at my phone, half expecting another call from Vanessa, but none came. Just silence. By morning, more whispers reached me. Daniel's accounts were frozen, his investors pulling out, and the trust my grandmother built was being reviewed by the board. They were asking questions about forged transfers and missing signatures. Questions that had only one answer. My father's name appeared in the papers filed with that trust. So did Vanessa's. I didn't even have to move a finger anymore. Truth had started walking on its own. And when truth walks in, lies run barefoot. The family group chat turned into a graveyard of messages. No one saying what they really meant, just short lines that smelled of panic. "We'll fix this." "Don't talk to anyone." "They can't prove anything." Then nothing. Hours of nothing. That silence felt like music. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reading every headline that appeared online. Daniel Miller, respected real estate broker, under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. The same man who told me I was too emotional to handle money. The same man who signed my name without permission. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Vanessa. Just 2 words. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, sipping my coffee. I didn't reply. She called next. I let it ring. Then again and again. By the 5th call, I answered. "Evelyn, what's happening?" she said. Her voice shook, but I could tell she was trying to control it. "I was about to ask you the same," I said. "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it's fair." She took a breath that sounded more like a gasp. "They're saying someone tipped off the auditors. Was it you? Does it matter? You're ruining everything." I stayed quiet. She started to cry, but the sound didn't move me. "Daniel might lose his license. Dad's being questioned. You don't know what this will do to us." I finally spoke. "You already did it to yourselves." She tried to laugh, a sharp, broken sound. "You've always been jealous. Admit it." "Jealous?" I said softly. "No, I just stopped pretending not to see who you are." She said something I couldn't make out before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone humming like a slow heartbeat. Then I turned it off and went back to my coffee. That night, I took a walk. The air was cold, sharp enough to wake my thoughts. The town looked different now, smaller somehow, quieter. People would talk soon, I knew that. My family had built their reputation on the illusion of perfection. But illusions don't survive the truth. When I got home, I checked my email. Mr. Kane had sent an update. The trust board had opened a formal inquiry. The documents we'd submitted had been reviewed and verified. It was official now. The lies weren't rumors anymore. They were evidence. I leaned back in my chair, reading his message twice. He ended with one sentence that made me exhale for the first time all day. "They'll have to answer in court." The words didn't feel like revenge. They felt like gravity returning to a world that had been tilted too long. Hours passed. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there, surrounded by quiet. It was the kind of silence that used to scare me, but now it felt like company. My phone sat face down on the table, buzzing every few minutes with new messages I refused to read. Then, near midnight, came a sound I hadn't expected. A furious knock on the door. I froze. It came again, harder this time. Then a voice I knew too well. "Evelyn!" Vanessa shouted. "Open the door!" I didn't move. "Open the door! What did you do?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I could picture her, hair perfect, mascara running, heels on the edge of the porch, pretending she still had control. The same girl who once laughed at my grief, now screaming at my silence. The knocking turned to pounding. "You think this makes you better than us?" she yelled. I stood there on the other side of the door, my hand resting lightly on the knob, heart steady, breath calm. I whispered to myself, "No, Vanessa, just finally equal." She screamed my name again, but I didn't answer. I let the sound of her rage fill the night until it broke apart into sobs. Then the noise stopped. The next thing I heard was her car engine starting, tires screeching as she drove away. I waited until the silence returned, deep and absolute. Then I smiled, just once, and whispered, "Now it begins." I heard the door slam before I even saw her. The sound cut through the house like a blade. I was in the kitchen, halfway through pouring coffee, when Vanessa's voice tore through the hallway. "You could have told me before ruining my life!" she shouted. I didn't move. The coffee kept pouring until the cup overflowed. I set the pot down slowly, wiped my hand on a towel, and turned toward her. She stood in the doorway, shaking. Her hair was messy, her mascara smudged, her expensive coat half-buttoned. For the first time, she didn't look like someone in control. She looked like someone cornered. I stayed quiet. Silence always scared her more than words. She took a step closer. "Say something." I met her eyes. "What is there to say?" "You've destroyed everything," she said. Daniel's business, Dad's reputation, our family's name. You went to the lawyers, didn't you? I leaned against the counter. You already know the answer. Her lip trembled. You could have warned me. We could have fixed it privately. I stared at her. Like you fixed the inheritance? Or Grandma's trust? Or my name on those forged papers? She blinked hard. That was years ago. We didn't think you'd ever find out. The honesty slipped out of her mouth before she could stop it. She froze. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was just sad. You ruined my life, she said again, softer this time. I nodded once. You ruined mine first. She flinched like the words hit her physically. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt heavy, thick with everything we'd never said. If you've ever faced someone who took everything from you and still made themselves the victim, you'll understand that silence that follows, it's not pity, it's power. She started pacing, her heels clicking against the tile. Daniel says the auditors are still digging. They found offshore accounts, they're freezing assets. Do you even know what that means for me? It means consequences, I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me. You think this makes you noble? You think you're better than us now? No, I said. Just cleaner. She laughed bitterly. You always had that holier-than-thou attitude. Even when we were kids, you acted like you were the victim. You think you're some martyr now, standing here with your cheap furniture and your sad little life? I let her talk. People like her needed to fill silence because silence reflected too much. She looked around my small kitchen, sneering at everything. My chipped mugs, the folded bills on the counter, the faded photo of Lily by the fridge. You think this, she said, waving her hand around, is justice? You've embarrassed us. You've embarrassed yourself. I stepped forward slowly until there was barely a foot between us. No, Vanessa, this is not justice. This is truth catching up. Her voice cracked. You could have come to me. I would have helped. I raised an eyebrow. Like you helped when Lily was sick? She looked away, guilt flashing across her face for a second before she pushed it down. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. She swallowed hard. You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. Jealous? I said quietly. I buried a child while you threw a party. There's nothing you have that I want. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, she didn't have a line ready. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at it and went pale. They're coming for Daniel, she whispered. The police. I said nothing. Her eyes darted back to me, wild now. You don't understand. They'll drag all of us into this. Dad's furious. Mom won't even leave the house. You've torn the family apart. It was already torn, I said. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. She slammed her hands against the counter. I hate you. I looked at her calmly. Then we're finally even. She stared at me for a long moment, chest rising and falling fast. Then her shoulders sagged, and her voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know what you've done. I tilted my head. I know exactly what I've done. For a long while, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. Then outside, I heard sirens in the distance, soft at first, then growing louder, closer. Vanessa's eyes widened. Oh, God, she said under her breath. She backed away from the window, her hands trembling. They're really coming. I poured another cup of coffee, the steam rising between us. You should probably go, I said. She shook her head. No, you have to help me. Please, Ev, please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her voice cracked on my name, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who used to hide behind me when our parents fought. The one who used to cry over scraped knees. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned how to lie so well she forgot what truth sounded like. Help me, she whispered again. I set the cup down gently. I did. I stopped you. Her eyes filled with tears. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But at least it's mine to regret. The sirens outside grew louder, lights flickering against the window pane. Red and blue streaks danced across her face. She turned toward the door, panic taking over. "Evelyn," she said, voice shaking. "Please." I took a slow breath. "Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness," I said softly, watching her freeze in place. "It comes from justice finally breathing." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The siren stopped outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. She looked at me one last time, her face a mixture of anger and fear. Then she collapsed into silence. I stood there, the coffee cooling in my hand, listening to the faint echo of footsteps on the porch. The knock came a moment later, hard, deliberate. I didn't rush to open it. I just stood still, breathing in the sound of the world finally catching up to her lies. The first time I stepped into the courtroom, the air felt too thin. My hands shook, but not from fear, from control. Every sound echoed, from the scrape of chairs to the shuffle of papers. Vanessa sat across the room, head high, her lawyer whispering in her ear like he could still save her. My parents sat behind her, both wearing the same strained look they used to give me when I said things they didn't want to hear. I didn't look at them. I looked straight ahead. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about truth. The judge entered and everyone rose. When we sat again, I heard the quiet buzz of cameras, the faint creak of old benches, and my heart beating steady beneath it all. I had waited for this moment for months, every late night collecting emails, printing documents, saving recordings that proved everything they had done. Now all I had to do was watch it unfold. My lawyer, Mr. Kane, stood first. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the evidence will show a clear pattern of forgery and theft involving the late Margaret Bell's trust." Vanessa's lawyer jumped in quickly. "Objection. These claims are—" The judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn, counselor." Vanessa shifted in her seat, eyes darting toward me. Her makeup was perfect, but her hands fidgeted on her lap. I wondered if she remembered the day she laughed at my daughter's memorial, telling me grief makes people selfish. Now she was the one cornered, and the room smelled like her fear. If you've ever seen the people who destroyed you finally realize the spotlight is theirs now, you know it's not joy you feel. It's release. Mr. Kane began playing the first recording. Vanessa's voice, smooth and certain. "Just sign her name," she'd said to Daniel. "She'll never notice. She doesn't even read this stuff." The room went silent. Even the judge leaned forward. My father looked down at his shoes. My mother clutched her purse like it could hide her shame. Vanessa's lawyer stood quickly. "That's out of context." Mr. Kane didn't flinch. "We'll provide the full recording, along with timestamps." He clicked a button and the next file played. Daniel's voice this time, lower, quieter. "Your dad said it's fine. She doesn't deserve it anyway." The judge's eyebrows rose. "Your dad?" he asked, glancing at Vanessa. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't answer. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, my breath even. I had dreamed of yelling at her, of calling her out, of finally making her see what she'd done, but I didn't need to anymore. The evidence was louder than I could ever be. Then came the emails. Mr. Kane handed printed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. Each one was signed with my name, each one sent from Daniel's office. One of them even thanked the bank for finalizing the transfer. The judge looked up. "Mrs. Miller, did you send these emails?" Vanessa hesitated. "I don't recall." Mr. Kane's tone was soft but surgical. "Would you like us to pull the metadata? It shows the IP address belongs to your home office." Vanessa's lawyer rubbed his temples. My father coughed quietly, but no sound came out. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Bell, would you like to make a statement?" I stood slowly. My voice came out calm, steady. "For years, they told me I was the problem, that I was too emotional, too fragile, too obsessed with the past. They took what wasn't theirs, and they did it with my grandmother's name on their lips. She trusted them. I trusted them. I'm not here for money. I'm here so the truth finally has a place to stand." The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then the judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Bell. Vanessa's lawyer stood, fumbling for words. Your Honor, my client regrets her past actions. She's willing to negotiate a settlement, the judge interrupted, his voice sharp. A settlement does not erase criminal activity. Forgery and fraud are not negotiable. Vanessa's face went pale. Her hand shot out toward her father. Dad, say something. He didn't. He just kept staring at the table. The same man who once told me, life doesn't stop for one child, now couldn't lift his head. The judge leaned back in his chair. I've seen enough, he said. The evidence presented is clear. Forgery, embezzlement, and fraudulent use of a family trust. The court hereby rules in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Evelyn Bell. The words echoed through me like a final breath. For a moment, I almost didn't believe them. Vanessa's lawyer tried one last time. Your Honor, surely my client's cooperation should... The judge raised a hand again. Her cooperation will be considered when sentencing. However, he paused, glancing at both Vanessa and my father. It appears her father's name appears on several of these documents as well. The court issues an immediate warrant for the arrest of both parties pending further investigation. My mother gasped. Vanessa froze. My father's head snapped up, his face drained of color. You can't be serious, he said. The judge didn't answer. Vanessa turned toward me, her mouth opening but no words coming out. I met her eyes for the first time all day. There was no triumph in me, no satisfaction, just stillness. I whispered under my breath, so softly no one could hear but me. You took everything you could. Now the world's taking it back. My father stood, shouting at the judge, but the bailiff was already moving toward him. Vanessa clutched her lawyer's arm, begging him to do something. He couldn't. I stayed seated, my hands resting on the same folder that had carried my proof, my past, my pain. The papers that once made me tremble now felt light. As the bailiff led them both away, I heard the shuffle of reporters outside, cameras clicking, voices rising. But I didn't look. I just stared at the empty space where they'd been sitting. The sound of handcuffs closing was softer than I expected. Just a click. A single, final note. I gathered my papers and stood. Mr. Kane placed a hand on my shoulder. It's over, he said quietly. I nodded. Not yet, I whispered. But almost. Behind me, my mother called my name once, pleading, but I kept walking. The hallway outside smelled of cold air and old wood. Each step I took felt heavier and freer all at once. Then as I reached the exit, I heard the sirens outside, sharp, distant, steady. I didn't turn back. The invitation came on a Sunday morning, folded neatly inside an envelope with my mother's handwriting on it. Dinner at home, just family, it said. I almost laughed. The words felt foreign now, like they belonged to another language I'd forgotten how to speak. For days, I kept it on the counter, next to the stack of legal papers I hadn't filed away yet. When I finally decided to go, it wasn't for closure. It was to see what silence had done to them. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the house looked smaller, not physically, just smaller in spirit. The curtains were drawn, the lights dim, the once perfect garden brown around the edges. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, listening. No laughter, no clinking of glasses. Just the hum of something broken trying to hold itself together. My mother opened the door first. Her face was tired, older than it had been just weeks ago. Evelyn, she said softly, you came. I said I would, I replied. She stepped aside and I walked in. The air smelled like roasted chicken and guilt. My father sat at the end of the table, shoulders bent, eyes low. Vanessa's chair was empty. Sit, my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. I sat across from my father. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. I traced the edge of my napkin with my finger and waited. Finally, he cleared his throat. We thought she needed it more. His voice was barely above a whisper. I looked at him. And you thought I'd stay silent. He winced. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It always goes this far when people think they can take without consequence. He looked at the table. You have every right to hate me. I don't, I said. Hate takes energy. I spent mine surviving what you ignored. He flinched again, and for the first time, I saw the weight he'd been carrying. Regret, maybe, or just fear of losing control. My mother reached for his hand, but he pulled away. If you've ever sat at a table where love used to live and found only ghosts, you'll understand how silence can feel louder than shouting. My mother spoke next. Your sister. She's not well. She's been calling every day, begging for help. Help? I said quietly. She never wanted help. She wanted power. She's lost everything, my mother whispered. Then she finally understands what that feels like. My father looked up at me. You really think this is justice? No, I said. It's balance. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. Your grandmother would have wanted peace. She wanted honesty, I replied. She just didn't live long enough to see any. No one spoke after that. The food sat untouched, steam fading, plates still full. My mother's hands shook when she tried to pour water, spilling a few drops on the tablecloth. No one moved to wipe them. I thought of the last time we'd all eaten here. Vanessa laughing too loudly, my father toasting her success. My mother telling me I should smile more. I remembered feeling invisible, watching them talk about a future that didn't include me. Tonight, that future had already collapsed, and all that was left was the echo of it. My father finally broke the silence. They froze her accounts, he said. Daniel left. He's filing for divorce. I looked at him carefully. You sound surprised. He didn't answer. She's our daughter, my mother said softly. We can't abandon her. She abandoned me first, I said. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She was wrong. We all were. I pushed my chair back slightly, the legs scraping against the floor. Then maybe start being right. My father looked at me like he wanted to say something more, but the words never came. He just nodded, slow and hollow. The clock kept ticking, marking every second of the silence. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the window like fingers tapping for attention. The smell of food was turning cold. I stood. I should go. My mother's voice cracked. Will you come back? I paused at the doorway. When there's something worth coming back to. She covered her face with her hands, and for a moment I almost reached out. But some distances can't be closed with a touch. Some wounds heal only when you stop reopening them. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, sharp and clean. I looked up at the house, its lights flickering softly behind the curtains, its walls holding the weight of too many lies. I walked down the path slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes. Halfway to the car, my phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Kane. Divorce papers filed, assets frozen, case closed. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, then at the house behind me. Inside, my parents were probably still sitting at that table, surrounded by everything they once called family. But for the first time in years, none of it belonged to them anymore. I started the car, the headlights cutting through the dark. The road ahead was empty, quiet. I drove without music, just the hum of the engine and my own thoughts filling the silence. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller until it disappeared completely. I whispered to myself, some dinners don't end. They just stop pretending. The letter from the hospice came on a quiet morning, folded neatly inside an envelope that smelled faintly of paper and lavender. It thanked me for the donation made under Lily's name. They said her memorial fund would help build a new wing for children who needed long-term care. I read the letter twice, tracing her name with my fingertip. It felt strange seeing it printed again. Lily Bell Memorial Foundation. For years, her name had been whispered in past tense, spoken like something delicate that might break. Now it was written in bold, carved into something that would last. Justice didn't bring her back, but it gave her name peace. If you've ever carried grief so heavy it turns to silence, you know how rare peace feels. When I walked into that hospice later that week, the air felt different. It wasn't heavy like hospitals. It was warm, filled with laughter that didn't sound forced. Children painted on the walls, nurses smiled, parents looked tired but alive. The director led me to a small plaque already hanging on the wall. It said, "In loving memory of Lily Bell, for the light she left behind." I stood there for a while, listening to the sound of life continuing. I didn't cry. I'd run out of tears long ago. What filled me now wasn't sorrow, it was stillness. When I got home, the sun was setting and the house was quiet. The folder with all the legal papers sat untouched on my desk. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to open it. I'd already gotten what I needed. Not money, not revenge, but balance. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the message made my heart slow. It was from Vanessa. "You won." 2 words, no punctuation, no apology, just surrender disguised as accusation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The version of me from a year ago would have smiled, maybe even felt triumph. But now, the words only felt hollow. Winning had never been the point. I typed back slowly. "No." I healed. Then I set the phone down and let the silence fill the room. I walked to the window and watched the street outside. The same porch light flickered across the road. The same neighbor walked her dog. The same wind brushed through the trees. Everything ordinary felt sacred again. That's what healing does. It makes the simple things glow. I made tea, the same way Lily liked it, with too much honey. I sat by her photo on the shelf. Her smile was small and shy, the kind that could melt anger in an instant. For a long time, I talked to her quietly. I told her the truth, that I'd finally stopped being angry at the world for taking her, that I was sorry it took me this long to forgive myself for not saving her. The kettle clicked off, and I realized how different the silence sounded now. It wasn't empty anymore. Later that evening, I opened the box I hadn't touched since the funeral. Inside were her drawings, crayon hearts, stick figures holding hands, and one that said "Mom and Me" in uneven letters. The paper had faded, but the colors were still there. I framed one and placed it beside the donation letter. 2 pieces of her, one from the past, one from the present. I made a promise then, not out loud, but deep inside. I'd keep building what they tried to bury. Every dollar they took would turn into something that healed instead of hurt. When I checked my email before bed, there was a new message waiting. The subject line read, "Community Honors, Annual Recognition Ceremony." At first, I thought it was spam, but then I opened it. "Dear Ms. Bell," it said, "we're pleased to inform you that you've been nominated for the Community Spirit Award for your contribution to children's health and hospice care. The new wing will carry your daughter's name. We would be honored to have you attend." I read it 3 times before the words sank in. I hadn't done any of it for recognition, but somehow it felt right, like life was returning what had been taken piece by piece. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the night sky was clear, the kind of dark that lets the stars breathe. I thought about Vanessa sitting somewhere behind bars, my parents avoiding the town they once ruled, and me, sitting here in the same small house, finally at peace, not triumphant, not broken, just whole. I thought of Lily again, and I whispered, "They know your name now." A soft breeze moved through the open window, brushing against the curtains. I like to think it was her, listening. I took the award invitation from the printer and placed it on the kitchen table. The ceremony was next week. I didn't know if I was ready to stand in front of people again, to let them see what survival looked like. But maybe that was the point. Maybe healing wasn't quiet after all. Maybe it was choosing to walk into light, even when you'd learned to live in shadow. I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of her framed drawing on the shelf. The colors flickered softly in the dark, like a heartbeat made of memory. As I lay in bed that night, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, of peace, of quiet victories, of love that couldn't be stolen or forged. And somewhere in the distance, the faintest sound of wind passed through the trees, carrying her name into the night. The lights were soft when I stepped up to the microphone. The hall wasn't big, just a small community center filled with faces I barely knew. The plaque with Lily's name stood beside me, shining gently under the light. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was the weight of everything that had led here, the silence, the humiliation, the long nights when I thought I'd never stand this steady again. I looked at the crowd, then at the children in the front row. Their laughter earlier had reminded me of her. My voice came out quiet, but clear. There was a time I thought silence meant weakness, I said, that if you didn't fight loud, you'd disappear. But I learned that silence can be strength too. It teaches you to listen, to others, to yourself, to the truth that doesn't need to shout to exist. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being broken by family, share your story. Someone out there needs to hear it. I paused, letting the words settle. People leaned in, waiting. Grief doesn't end, I continued softly. It changes shape. It becomes part of you. And if you let it, it can build something better. I lost my daughter, and for a long time I thought that was the end of me too. But her love didn't end. It just found new ways to live. The room stayed quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the lights, the soft breathing of the people listening. I didn't come here to talk about loss, I said. I came to talk about what comes after, the part no one prepares you for, the slow, quiet rebuilding, the days when you stand up again, not to prove anything, but simply because it's time. A small smile found its way to my face. If you've ever been broken, know this: you are not the ruins. You are what grows after. Applause started, hesitant at first, then warm. I stepped back from the microphone, nodding in thanks, my heart steady. The cameras flashed once, catching me mid-smile. I didn't pose for them. It wasn't that kind of moment. When the ceremony ended, I walked outside alone. The night air was cool, the sky clear, the stars scattered like quiet witnesses. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel heavy. I stood under that sky and whispered her name, not with pain this time, but with peace. Then I walked to my car, calm and certain that the story was finally over.